Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and today is a big episode. It's big not because Liverpool have changed formation, and not because Liverpool seem back to winning ways. It's big because this is Dave's last ever appearance on Analysing Anfield. Dave, how do you feel, mate, ahead of your testimonial?
I can hear the cheers from here as everybody tunes in, how do I feel? Yeah, I don't know. I think it's certainly an end of an era. Obviously, I'm leaving the organisation. I'm leaving the Mirror and leaving Reach as a whole. Moving on to a new adventure. And obviously, this show has definitely been a huge part of my time here. We've been here now for coming up to 4 years in the company, haven't we? I'd say about 3 3/4 of that is Analysing Anfield has been a regular fitting. Although obviously over the past few months, maybe new listeners don't know. I've only been a bit part player in that time over the last few months, but certainly before that, we were doing this every single week. So yeah, it's a shame that it's come to an end. But I really enjoyed doing it. When the idea first come about, obviously it was yourself, Christian come to me, potentially about me coming on the show. Didn't know how it would go down, obviously with the Everton background, but I guess it's a testament to the the listeners that we have on the show that it's on the surface, at least from my end, seems like it's been a success and people have enjoyed listening to what you've said, what I've said, despite that background. And we've had a really kind of great core audience in that time. And I know they're definitely going to stick around because of you, because of the guests who are coming on instead. But, from a personal point of view, mate, I've really enjoyed it. And it's definitely been a lot more enjoyable than I expected it to be when the idea first come about.
Yeah, well, you've only witnessed your arch rivals win the Premier League, win the Champions League, so it's been nice to have you on board for that, to be honest.
Yeah, just about every single trophy available, I think they won. Certainly, the elite Premier competitions. So I'm definitely a good luck charm, and we'll see if that continues once I've left. But yeah, that's the point I'm making. I guess joking aside, despite all of that, it's been really good talking about the club, talking with you every week about it, and kind of one last hurrah here today, one last show to do, and then you'll take it all on your own incapable hands with the new guests.
Yeah, well, this is the last dance, mate. This is the big episode, but as I said, it's been great to podcast with you, and I think the Everton background that you've got has allowed us to be a little bit different, maybe, to the average Liverpool podcast, and then we couple that in with the use of analytics and things like that, which lots of other shows are using, I'm sure, but we do try to make it an integral part of how we analyse things on this show. And all things considered, I think it's allowed us to just be a little bit different to the average podcast out there on Liverpool fan base. It's allowed us to, establish quite an audience now. And I couldn't have done it without you, really. So you're going to be difficult to replace, mate.
Yeah, no, listen, it means a lot. We should have probably saved this for the end, but in case the tears start rolling. But no, yeah, it has. I suppose we have had that more objective feel to the show, which isn't for everyone. Some prefer that kind of real staunch Liverpool fan background and that influence. We haven't always had that, but that's kind of been, I guess, a USP for us. And I think some people do enjoy that, a little bit more of a neutral view on things, as well as, having that kind of supporter aspect from yourself as well. So, yeah, it's been really good. But listen, mate, I know it'll just continue to be a really, really big success over the coming kind of months and years, with you leading the way. And yeah, it's end of an era, I guess.
Well, we'll see on that, to be honest, because Liverpool have been a shambles since Sadio Mane left. So it doesn't bode well for us, does it? But yeah, we'll see anyway. But we'll get to all this towards the end of the show anyway, I think. But in the meantime, one last time at least, we get to talk about Liverpool, and it's quite a talking point at the minute, really. If it had been a few days ago, it'd have been a really grim chat, and it'd have been problem solving. It'd have been getting to the bottom of ongoing issues because Liverpool played Brighton, and it was bad. It was bad. I know Liverpool scored 3 goals, and the character was there, how always has been there, to come back and get a 3-2 lead at one point. The attacking output has always been there in terms of the goals and things like that. But defensively, Liverpool was still just wide open. And Brighton scored 3 goals every time Brighton tried to attack Liverpool. I thought Liverpool looked vulnerable. And as I said, he scored 3 times. And we might as well touch on dynamics of that game before then looking at what happened last night against Rangers. Because Liverpool seems to have underwent quite a tactical shift to change, which is very good in my opinion. But before we get to the change, we might as well look at why Klopp had finally looked at it and thought, this is bad, this needs to get put in the bin, basically.
Yeah. It was certainly, from a performance perspective, not so much results, but performance. That was one of the worst kind of modern Liverpool performances, I'd certainly watch because, and Klopp touched on it, there was just a lack of control, wasn't there, throughout? I think Liverpool always have a chance of overturning deficits, especially if you're 2 down. I think there's always a chance at Anfield that they can recover, but I think that the general lack of control in the game, the ease in which Brighton were playing through them, and okay, you're seeing it in the league table this season, but we've said for a while that they're a really good team. They tend to cause, or they have in the past caused Liverpool a couple of issues. If you think of the 2-2 game, for example, last season at Anfield, but yeah, it was the ease in which they penetrated through Liverpool. I think there was a lot of focus on obviously Trent at right back in the game and kind of what's been going on there, but it was more for me the ease in which they were just playing through the middle. That was the scariest part from a Liverpool perspective. For whatever reason, I think there's a few reasons. Fabinho doesn't look himself. He looks a little bit off it. From a physical standpoint, it looks like he's maybe doing a little bit more work than he has done in the past. He's not able to kind of govern that area in the same way he is or has done. And there's just a lot of gaps that were being brutally exposed by a really good side. And it was definitely worrying. I think that's why there wasn't that much kind of celebrating of Liverpool coming back into the game, from 2 down. I know they obviously conceded the third late on, but you maybe in years gone by, there would be a lot of talk about the great character throughout the squad. But, from what I've seen, there was very little that afterwards. And it felt like a watershed moment, maybe, Josh.
Yeah, even if Liverpool won the game, my perspective and my mood wouldn't have been that great on the show. I still thought Liverpool was still very much suffering from the same problems that they've suffered from all season, really. And what I will say is, I remember a period of time where I think Liverpool lost something like 6 games in a row at Anfield, and we covered that period on this podcast. And I kind of remember saying, despite the results and that, I think we were still very much in the camp that the numbers still paint Liverpool as a pretty decent outfit, and it's a matter of time before things turn and that sort of stuff. And Liverpool ended up going on quite a run towards the end of that season and finishing third in the end. I think they won something like, 10 games in a row or whatever. One of the reasons this time around I've been so concerned, and one of the reasons I think Klopp justified in literally throwing the system out and starting again afresh, is because of the numbers attached to the season. So Brighton only took 6 shots against Liverpool, which is generally good. If you're keeping your opposition down to 6 shots, you're doing okay there. For a bit of perspective, so far this season, the only 2 teams in the league who are facing fewer shots per match is Manchester City and Arsenal, who are, I think, the top 2 at the minute. So 6 shots is good. But the expected goals attached to those shots were far too high. Brighton amassed 1.6 xG from just 6 shots, which basically suggests that the shots that Brighton had were really valuable, and they were all in the penalty box. and I think 5 out of the 6 were also within the width of the 6-yard box as well. So central, good shots from around the penalty spot. And if you concede a few of them, you're just not going to win many games. And Liverpool, again, despite having a couple of weeks off, there's a bit of a caveat in there considering Klopp didn't have many of his players. They were away on international duty, so he didn't literally have 3 weeks to work on the new system or anything like that, or to work on what Liverpool are doing wrong. But still, you would expect going into the Brighton game after a bit of time off, those massive holes to be plugged, and they just weren't. Brighton cut through us like a knife through butter, and it was really concerning, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. It's really tough, I think, because the run you talked about and that we covered, what was it, about 18 months ago? There was just glaring personnel issues there. You're playing with a makeshift back four, trying to implement the same kind of system that is only successful because it's reliant on the personnel who's in it, and then you're trying to put in different profiles and hope for the same success. So it wasn't a huge success, a huge shock. Sorry that it didn't work, but this time though, you've got a lot of the kind of Liverpool's best players out there. I know they've had a little bit of bad luck with some injuries, but on the whole, it looked like the team that should be, dominating or has dominated in the past. But yeah, there was just the performance wasn't there. Too many gaps. The midfield was the big one for me, and obviously Fabinho in the midfield, he just looks so far off the kind of levels we've seen off him in the past, to the point where I don't know if it's solely his responsibility. I think maybe there's just a demand on him to do too much, and he just can't do it on his own now. And I think that's why the shape changed. So it takes less responsibility on him. Obviously, I know he didn't start last night, did he? But it takes less responsibility out on him, and there's also more cover for the likes of Trent, who's been getting absolutely hammered, because it's just the system that Liverpool have. It's always exposed them defensively. It's always done it because you are basically always defending in transition, and normally you're doing it with at least one or two fewer defenders than other Premier League sides will when the ball's turned over. So it's just, it leaves them so exposed, and they've got away with it in the past because they've had such dominant players. Van Dijk, for example, can defend like that with ease. But this year, we're seeing that they just can't, and I feel like for the first few weeks, the hope was it was just a bit of a phase or something that they come through. But when you start to realise that you can't depend on the profiles in the same way you had in the past, it felt inevitable that a change would have to happen. As I said, I think the Brighton game was the watershed moment, or the straw that broke the camel's back, in terms of being like, this needs to change now.
Yeah, a lot of it looked almost physical to me. I've seriously wondered whether we've got something dramatically wrong in pre-season after playing 60 odd games or whatever it was last term. Getting to a FA Cup final and things like that. But I tweeted after the game the other day, and I got a few responses saying like, why are Liverpool playing like this? And I don't really know. It's been really weird to watch. But one thing I kind of grasped against Brighton is Liverpool have only really looked in control this season, and those periods of control is what have made me feel a bit more safe and reassured that it's going to turn. But when you think about it, we've only really looked in control when the opponents have got a lead, and as a result, they drop off a bit, and Liverpool gain a bit of possession, bit of territory, and it starts going from there then, and then Liverpool starts scoring goals because they can play attack versus defence, essentially. But whenever it made me think that whenever Liverpool are actually attacked, they just get battered, essentially. And it happened against Brighton, when the scores were level near the start of the game. Brighton scored twice, then they sat off. Liverpool got a 3-2 lead. As soon as Brighton need a goal again, they go up the pitch and just get one. And I looked at the numbers attached to that just to kind of see if I could quantify that almost. And so what I did was I looked at what the expected goals looks like performance-wise when neither team has a lead in the Premier League this season for Liverpool. So when the scores are tied, Liverpool have averaged 1.8 xg and have averaged 1.5 xg against. So that's not great. You're not going to win many games if those are your numbers, because the margin is so small. 1.8 to 1.5 is tiny. That doesn't suggest that you're a dominant side. That doesn't suggest that your performance deserves to win. They're the numbers typically posted by, I don't know, just Leicester, or I don't know, a mid-table,
mid-table team,
Aston Villa, whoever it might be. So what we essentially call that is a coin flip. You're flipping the coin there as to whether you're going to win, because your performance is not dramatically better than the opposition. And if you look at last season, for example, to show what that was like when we were winning games all the time, again with the scores tied, Liverpool averaged about 2 xg on a per 90 basis, compared to just 0.9 on the defensive side. So 2 compared to 0.9, that's a sizable gap there. That's like, Liverpool, okay, deserved winners most of the time. Performance is doing enough. But this season, it definitely hasn't been the case, which is why I'm absolutely in favour of a system change. Because, as I said, it's just not only were the results bad, but crucially, the most important thing, the performances were not good either.
Have you have you kind of dwelled on the point that some have mentioned, that perhaps Liverpool have been caught in between wanting to make a kind of tactical or system adjustment and not being able to? Because obviously ahead of the summer, or in the summer, it looked like one was definitely coming, or it actually looked like it's been maybe coming for a while. But if you think of the profiles that come in, if you think of obviously Nunez, the out and out number 9. If you think of Carvalho coming in from Fulham, obviously he traditionally always played number 10, hadn't he? It looked like it was all gearing toward a change, and then the Nunez's suspension was I think when you look back now with hindsight, it felt an irritant at the time, a bit of an annoyance that he wasn't going to be available. But it almost feels like it's had a kind of domino effect, both on his Liverpool career taking off, and also maybe what Liverpool plan to do in those early kind of few months of the season. I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on whether you thought Liverpool have maybe wanted to make adjustments, been leading towards doing so, Klopp and co, making changes, but then maybe kind of not being able to in the same way, sticking to similar tactics from this last season or two, and maybe either A, getting found out, teams are starting to suss out to play against that, or there just being a little bit of kind of mixed messages in the instructions.
Yeah, I think in pre-season, during the transfer window and things, we did predict quite a few times that the signings Liverpool have made do suggest that Liverpool are moving towards a 4-2-3-1 sometime soon. We thought that the season would go well, and we thought that gradually, with time, 4-2-3-1 would become more prominent. I didn't think it would become the go-to this season, but I thought by the end of the season, it'd pretty much be that, with a view to being fixed in place next season. That's how I thought it would go. I didn't think it'd be as dramatic as Liverpool play 10 games, win something like 3 of them, and have to change because results and performances have just fell off a cliff. But I do think that this happens to a fair few teams when a coach with so many ideas has been in charge for a few years. I think Guardiola comes to mind when City drew 1-1 with West Brom at the Etihad a few years ago. Guardiola had been in charge for a couple of years by then. City had won a few titles and stuff, but they just seemed to gradually drift away from the original idea of what Guardiola's about and started to pick up negative results, essentially. And it took for that watershed moment for Guardiola to kind of say, and he's come out and said this, I didn't like my team at that point. And from then on, he just restored his principles with those being like, just short passes all the time, not too much dribbling or individual, expression when it comes to ball carrying and things like that. Obviously, possession, control, the slow tempo, all of those have been reinstated since that date. And City have won, I think, 2 titles since. Went on to win the Premier League that season, of course, when Liverpool suffered from an injury crisis. And I think it generally happens with Rodgers as well. But Rodgers is another one who does well in his first 18 months or so. But then because he just installs so many different ideas over time, his teams tend to get to a point where they're just a bit of a mix of everything without actually being anything almost. And I think Liverpool, in search of evolution, specifically when it comes to Trent, I've just went a little bit galaxy brain. That's how I keep defining it. Like like a thinking man's tactic, where you're trying to come up with new ideas, you're trying to innovate, you're trying to keep things fresh, but you get to a point where you're going a bit daft, and you need someone to say, "Hey, you're going a bit wacky here." And
do you think that's been happening over the 10 games this season, that they've been trying different things?
No, I think it predominantly started last season when you started seeing Trent rotate with Henderson and Salah, and sometimes previous seasons when we first started doing all this, Trent would be on the flanks, Salah would be inside as the scorer, and Henderson would be the deeper player as the safety net. But because of these new rotations that we've installed, sometimes it can be a case of Salah's the wide player, even though you want him to score goals. Trent is the withdrawn player, even though you want him to be on the flanks creating probably. And Henderson's being the inside forward when you want him to be the safety net. So it's just got to a point where it's just gone a little bit overthinking almost, just too much evolution where it's got unhealthy a little bit. And it has needed, in my opinion, a bit of someone to kind of say, listen, back to basics here. We need to kind of strip off a few of these layers that we've added over the past few years and just go literally back to basics. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because I remember talking maybe 12 months ago. Well, we were both talking, on the show, about the need for this team at some point will need to evolve. As the originals, I guess you could call them, start moving on. So Mane is an example of that. As these players start moving on, different, you might try and get similar profiles, but at the end of the day, they're going to be different personnel coming in. You're probably going to need to adjust one or two things. And you also need to, because football's just ever-changing cycles, isn't it? You can never dominate. Show me one team who's dominated any league for, 5 years, playing the exact same system, tactic, and approach to every game. It's just not possible, because you're at the elite of you're at the very highest level. Managers, teams, players, they're going to find a way to nullify your threats, nullify you being that good. Even, Liverpool have been fantastic. There will be counters to it. And I just wonder on that point, maybe if these adjustments that have been made to try and implement that evolution, maybe it hasn't been the right kind of changes, or they've had in part, beforehand planning it out, it seems good, but the actual practicality of it hasn't always been as beneficial as they would have wanted, or it's had a few more kind of negative aspects to it that couldn't have been initially predicted, and something that leads to some of the stuff you were just pointing out.
Yeah, well, when you was talking there about teams generally keeping the same system like forever and never really suffering, I think a lot of people will naturally think of Ferguson's United there and put that forward as a thing. But if you think of the details and shifts that Ferguson underwent over the years, there was a lot of them. At one point it was 4-4-2 where he had two proper strikers. Then one of the proper strikers kind of dropped off and became like a Cantona and like a number 10 type area. There was points where he added Varane in his midfield to offer a bit of almost like a Zidane type thing. With time, as wingers start to become a bit more inside, with the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo being more of a inside forward than a winger, and eventually he moved upon 4-3-3 with Rooney as a wide forward and Ronaldo through the middle and things. So even the teams that you probably think haven't changed that much tactically, they have.
Yeah, he was actually a master evolver, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a Liverpool podcast, but believe me, Ferguson was brilliant at all that sort of stuff. Really good at keeping things fresh and mixing things up and crucially as well, I think he was the best at just recognising when somebody or something's time is up and just appreciating that. Listen, we need the next thing here.
Yeah.
Sometimes a bit too ruthless in that sense.
Yeah. Maybe he was a bit premature at times, but I don't know. A lot of the time, it tends to work out for him. It's very, very rare. I can think of too many examples where he's shown someone the door and it's come back to bite him. Obviously, he lost players who went on to be fantastic, Ronaldo, but they were one of the few examples of him choosing to leave. Whereas I can't think of too many times he pushed someone out and lived to regret it.
Yeah. So anyway, on the back of Liverpool's performance against Brighton, which absolutely was not good enough, Liverpool moved towards Rangers, and it's a midweek game. You've just returned back. People are unfit. You've got one session, but it looks like Liverpool have moved towards 4-4-2 as a new system, and it looks like, based on what Klopp said, I've listened to a lot of his words since in interviews and stuff, and it sounds like this is an actual shift. He's already talking about 4-3-3 as how we used to play, which is quite telling, I think. And he said, like, you wouldn't really change your system, would you, to face Rangers at Anfield? You're only doing that really if you're not doing that for Rangers, are you? You're doing that for your own sake of a system change.
Yeah, with the greatest respect to Rangers, going into the competition, they'd obviously suffered 2 heavy defeats. They'd faced the most shots. They had the joint highest expected goals against. I think they'd had the most touches in their own penalty area. Again, with the greatest respect to them, I'm not trying to put them down. We're just talking objectively here. They were probably one of the easiest opponents you could come up against. And that leads into the point you're making, Josh, that it's like you wouldn't really adjust to nullify them strengths. In many ways, it was kind of the perfect practice game, if that makes sense. Although it was a crucial Champions League match that Liverpool couldn't really afford to lose, it was the ideal kind of opponent at Anfield, European night, where you could implement something a little bit different and see how it gets on, and obviously prove to be a success.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to get carried away, considering it's just Rangers. So even Liverpool's 4-3-3 would have probably delivered a strong performance.
I hope Rangers fans don't come across this little segment here, otherwise we'll be getting some abuse.
I know, knowing what they're like, mate, they probably will come across it somehow.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, we don't want to be get carried away with it, because Liverpool should be beating Rangers at Anfield regardless. But I specifically liked, regardless of how Liverpool performed against the opposition, I really liked the switch. I liked how things worked and how the problems were addressed. Specifically, I think you ask any Liverpool fan at the minute, the overwhelming biggest issue, without doubt, has been the whole Trent thing. And that's not, this is important, that's not specifically Trent's fault as an individual. It's a product of the system. Trent's individual defending still needs work, but the overall issue of balls going in behind him all the time is not specifically Trent's problem if he's instructed to explore the final third, essentially. So that's been the avenue that every opposition has used against Liverpool this season, and it's starting to really cause us issues. Conceding a fair few goals for and things like that. So this seems to be a shift for multiple reasons, but specifically so that doesn't happen anymore. Because when Rangers attempted to build from the back, which admittedly didn't happen that often, Trent was no longer really part of the high press. It was the front 4 and the midfield 2, that group of 6, and the back 4 kind of remained intact, which allowed Trent to remain connected to the back 4. There was no space behind him anymore, and we'll see more moving forward how it works against the likes of Arsenal and City, but against Rangers at least, I can only think of one opportunity where I think Ryan Kent attempted to play a pass into that channel when Trent was a little bit upfield, and it ran out of play. It wasn't a good enough pass, but other than that, I can't think of any moments in the game where that happened. And we've touched on it a few times, haven't we? As to whether it's normal so much for Liverpool, and whether it's you just naturally take it as a product of the system, or whether you should actually be concerned about it. But the fact Klopp is now addressing it and hopefully getting rid of it is a positive, really.
Yeah, and this is something that flagged last time. Certainly I was on the show. I'm sure you spoke about it with other guests since, but I pretty much come to the conclusion last time I was on that it's no longer a byproduct, and I think it's a genuine problem that needs to be addressed in terms of how many big chances we're getting created against Liverpool. And there's no doubt about it that Trent was very much kind of being exposed as a result of the system. And what the 4-4-2 does is it makes you much more compact. Even if you think of the issue against Brighton, it wasn't even everything going over the top with diagonals or anything. It was being played through the middle, which is criminal, really. Especially for the team as good as Liverpool. And what's the 4-4-2 brilliant for? Making you centrally compact. If you think of some of the managers who kind of thrive using it, some of the best, Simeone, obviously, at Atletico.
I actually remember Ancelotti
I was just about to say Carlo Ancelotti, big on the 4-4-2. He kind of brought that in Everton, and it masked a lot of their issues in terms of personnel. Because it's as a shape, it's very kind of focused on organizational kind of positional locations, where players be. It kind of covers the key areas of the pitch really well, and offers support because you've always got a lot of players nearby or within touching distance. So I think it was a wise move to go to that. It definitely adds more support for Trent. My only issue with it, Josh, which maybe we'll talk about in a minute, I'd be interested to see how it works against a 3-man midfield, because obviously technically that would give the opposition an overload in the middle. It'd be 3v2 in there. Now, how do you counter that? Maybe if you think of who'd be dropping off, Jota coming in to try and support, creating a kind of 3 in there without the ball, or Firmino, he'd be good at that as well. But the reason the 4-4-2 kind of disbanded was because of how it could be punished with a 3-man midfield. And it'll just be interesting to see when Liverpool come up against a different kind of system, how they get on with it.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting, that moving forward, actually. But overall, I like I think when Ancelotti was speaking about it, what I seen was, I think he referenced 4-4-2 as, in his opinion, the best system to defend out of. I think that's what he said. And it's interesting that Manchester City currently defend out of a 4-4-2 as well. The system is a little bit different sometimes. You can play 4-2-3-1 when you've got the ball. It can be a 4-2-4, whatever. But usually when it comes to how you defend, you probably defend out of a 4-4-2. Whether Liverpool will have issues at any point when it comes to players between the lines remains to be seen, whether that be a lone 6 playing between the lines, or a number 10 playing between the lines. It'd be interesting, but I suppose that's on Klopp to think about it. That's on Henderson and Thiago or Fabinho or whoever the double pivot is to manage what's going on in front of them and what's going on behind them. I mean, City and Arsenal, to be honest, are two obvious sides that you feel like would have the technical players to exploit that, really. And it's interesting that Liverpool have got them coming up immediately. But Liverpool have played against City using a 4-4-2 at the Etihad once and did quite well as well.
Yeah. I remember vividly from that game, they caught them cold, didn't they? There was no kind of indications beforehand that it was going to be a 4-4-2. I think Jota started that game as well. And for the first 20 minutes, they really dominated City. So that will be interesting. The only reason that I think specifically about the overloads and the issues that has is I touched on one point because 4-4-2 become quite a kind of rare formation over the last few years because of the like the 3-man midfields and stuff. But I also remember, and admittedly, much worse quality player. I don't know if that's a sentence that makes sense. Much worse. I think it does. I don't know. Anyway, maybe that's why I'm retiring from podcasting. But I remember Chelsea having a field day against the kind of 4-4-2 Everton at Stamford Bridge, where I think they beat them 4-0 just before COVID hit, and they tore them apart through midfield. And Liverpool have got so much better players than Everton had on that day. But you do just wonder if certain teams could find a way to expose it. Maybe the answer will be it'll become a little bit of a hybrid, as you said, a little bit. I think Liverpool have done a little bit of 4-4-2 in the past without the ball anyway, but maybe that's the system without the ball. And then when they've got comfortable possession, it goes into something a little bit different. Well, that's, I imagine, what we'll probably see.
Yeah, well, this is what you hear a lot, don't you? When it comes to 4-4-2 systems, it's people have different opinions on what it is. Some people will say it's a 4-2-4. Some people will say it's a 4-2-3-1. I would always naturally look at the shape in which the team defend to define the label for the system, if you like, and then whatever kind of happens in possession almost just happens sometimes.
Yeah.
If Josh is a bit more inclined to drop off and act as a bit of a, I don't know. I don't think Jota is a 10 for me. For me, it was more of a second striker thing, and as part of a 4-4-2 personally. But there's loads of different opinions on what that'll be. But it's literally come out of Klopp's mouth. It's a 4-4-2. So that's Trent kind of said that. I suppose it's a bit of a 4-2-3-1 with Jota dropping off Darwin, but that's what it is for me anyway. But overall, in terms of Trent specifically, it should address that glaring defensive issue of him being caught upfield. It should solve that, and in addition to solving that, it should kind of open up a few possibilities for some other players in the squad. I've just mentioned Nunez. I think Nunez could benefit from this. One of the things Trent said after the game was that we played with out-and-out wingers, which means Salah is obviously going to be a bit more inclined to occupy the flanks, even more so than he already has done this season. And if he does that, the man in the middle who's going to be putting the ball in the net is going to be Nunez, and he did accumulate the most shots in the game. They were all from really good locations.
I think he had about 4 shots on target, didn't he?
Yeah, he could have honestly scored a hat-trick in the first half. But people will be inclined to focus on the fact that that ball didn't go in the net. I always like to steer the conversation towards the chances he's getting. He's getting those chances. Good areas, good locations, lots of them. So the goals should come if that keeps happening.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you can talk about placement, how a player's finish, but I always think that's micro analysis, especially with something that's so volatile as finishing. It's really hard to be a consistent great finisher. I think if you can just consistently get shots and even better get them on target, then you're going to score a lot of goals. If he's getting 4 shots on target every week, trust me, he'll have a healthy goal return come the end of the season. I thought he looked sharp. I do. I think he looked sharp. I think it's a massive benefit how it worked for him, the system. I think it will do him some good having someone else up there with him, because if you think, look, it isn't always as simple as it's not as if you're just talking it through on a tactics board here. Football games consistently kind of moving about, evolving. The pitch is always changing. But if you just think of a kind of situation where Nunez is playing up against 2 centre-backs, who are, potentially doubling up on them, able to kind of move in between them. It's difficult. If you've got a second player like of Jota's quality there causing issues as well, suddenly it's a 1v1 against the centre-back, and he's got the physical profile that can cause any centre-back issues. So I do think that kind of 2-man attack will do really well. And then plus you look at the flanks and you think, that's not bad, is it? Diaz on one side, Salah on the other. That's a dangerous combo. And it also takes the pressure off the wing backs a little bit. Suddenly they can be support players as opposed to primary creators, which is what they've been over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, well, one thing I've picked up on with Nunez already is just, I mean, so far this season, that is I don't think he's, for me, as technically clean as a Firmino, a Sadio Mane, even a Salah. I think he's a bit more almost rough around the edges and just a little bit out of sync almost sometimes, the way he moves and the way he operates in deeper areas and things. And my perspective on it has been, use him like you would use Haaland, and the way you would use Haaland would be keep him away from the ball, let him put the ball in the net, let everyone else construct the moves. And I think in this game, because Nunez had a partner in Jota, and he's at the very tip of the system, a little bit less of a responsibility on his shoulders to drop into deeper areas as part of it too, compared to if he was a long striker in the 4-3-3. All of those considered, I think this should put more of a spotlight on Nunez being Liverpool's finisher, while kind of masking the fact that he's maybe not as much of a possession-based player as Liverpool have had in the past couple of years. Because he does have, he has had, I mean, it could just be nerves, he's still a kid and things like that, but he has had a few moments where his first touches look miles off it, or he's played a daft pass to nobody, or whatever it might be. It's like he got a bit of a nosebleed almost when he drops into the middle third. But when he's in the box, mate, he's lethal. His ability to find a target. Okay, they haven't gone in so much yet, but his ability to find a target so far, and this was the case last season as well at Benfica, he's a proper marksman, and Liverpool need to get that out of him.
Yeah. I mean, put bluntly, he's not a facilitator, he's a goal getter. That's what he's there for. He's there to spearhead their attack, and he's there to be the guy who finishes the moves, not really help create them. And again, that's what I was saying is, of Liverpool being caught a little bit between ideas, because for me, wasn't that, and the kind of adjusting to kind of funnel towards that focal point. But I wouldn't be worried about Nunez at all. Fair enough, if he was getting 4 shots a game and ballooning them over the bar or putting them wide, I'd be a little bit more nervous. But when you have 4 shots on target, you're really unlucky that one of them hasn't gone in. And, McGregor, we saw it, he had a really good performance. How often are you going to come up against the keeper on song like that? Not every week. So, yeah, I wouldn't have many major concerns about Nunez. I think his time will come, and all these kind of jibes that maybe he's had to put up with over the last few weeks and months, I think will slowly will simmer down, and he'll go on to be an important player.
Yeah, I mean, just including every minute he's played for Liverpool so far, which is only about 350 around that. He's averaging 7.6 shots per 90, which is daft, absolutely daft. If you look back at Premier League history, I think Luis Suarez at Liverpool in that season was averaging 5.5. I think Cristiano Ronaldo in that season when he was at United was averaging about 5.5. I think Kane's best was about 5.2 or something like that. Obviously, Nunez's will drop. It will come down from that. But the fact that he's averaging 7.6 shots per 90 without really being a integrated part of the squad yet, it bodes well for his ability to score goals. I'm convinced the goals will come with him. He just looks like one of those players who's going to be a poacher, and his movements is top class. But I am very fixed on the idea that we need to let him do that and very little else, if I'm honest. Because his possession game is a little bit rusty. Well, not rusty, but I don't know. I'm trying to look for the right word. Erratic, maybe. I'm not sure.
The thing is, as we talk about when he signed, he's a traditional striker. That's what he's there for. And traditional strikers have never been these kind of facilitators. It's just not the game. Even Haaland. Okay, you'll see Haaland receive the ball into feet, maybe you lay it off well. You might do some decent link-up play, but you certainly wouldn't like to see Haaland being your kind of creative player in and around the attacking third. You want him one place, and that's in front of goal. I don't think Nunez is at Haaland's quality, but I think there is similarities between the two for sure.
Yeah, there was points in the Manchester derby where Haaland was dropping off towards like the centre circle and picking the ball up and stuff with his back to goal, and he kept the ball more often than not, but he did look relatively uncomfortable compared to the almost the confidence that we used to seeing him have. And it's no real major slant on Nunez that Nunez is similar in that sense. These players are players who you want on the shoulder at all times, just leading the line, finishing the move in the box where it matters, and kind of everything before that. You let them just be a little bit of a passenger. And I remember saying pre-season that this season's Premier League title could be decided by which coach integrates his new passenger better, out Guardiola and Klopp. Sadly, it looks like it's Guardiola, but it's nice to see that Liverpool have recognised this so early in the season. We're only a couple of games in, and hopefully moving forward we can be a lot better. Just before we do round up, I also think this can benefit the midfield, considering if you're playing with the 2 8s are responsible for that vertical running, box to box all the time. And you've got to consider these players are getting on. They haven't really got the legs anymore. If you're in a midfield 2, you're just kind of moving a bit more side to side, and you're kind of in the middle third for the whole game, really. So you should technically, in a way, at least cover less ground in a intense running state, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, maybe take off those physical demands that we've touched on numerous times in the past. That maybe when you're playing so many football matches, such a quick turnaround, you go into the latter stages of competitions. It does inevitably have an impact, and maybe they'll be able to reserve some more energy.
Yeah, well, Liverpool have got Arsenal next, so that is going to be interesting, and we're going to be reviewing that next week. We would have liked to preview it, but running out of time a little bit. So yeah, we'll review that one. Hopefully Liverpool's 4-4-2 remains intact and it remains solid. But I won't be reviewing it with Dave. Dave, how'd you feel now, mate?
Yeah, as I said, mate, I can only echo what I said at the start of the show. It's been really good to be part of it. I know it'll continue to be, strength to strength, really successful. And I'm glad to have played a part over the last few years. And thanks very much for hosting it, mate. You've been a good partner in it all.
Yeah, well, you can kind of imagine us now clapping you off the pitch in like a bit of a Hall of Fame kind of way with like Steven Gerrard or something like that. But sadly, we can't do that. We're limited to Zoom or StreamYard or whatever this is.
To be fair, back in the day, it was in the studio, wasn't it, mate? Maybe if I would have done a lap in the studio back in the ball. Yeah, since the post-COVID days, it's Zoom. So no, I'll have to miss out on that.
Yeah, no, but genuinely, mate, it's been a pleasure. I think we've had been on the same wavelength and things. It's nice to have that when you're hosting a podcast with just 2 people. Obviously, the fact that you're Nevertonian and you've appeared on a Liverpool podcast consistently for a period of about 3 years or so, is a testament really to your football knowledge and willingness to put that kind of rivalry aside, if you like.
I mean, so, it ain't at Goodison Park anymore, so it hasn't been without expense, mate. But
yeah. But yeah, so any time in the future, mate, if you ever want to appear on the pod as a special guest or whatever, it will obviously have to be in your free time now. But I don't know, I'm talking years, Merseyside derby potentially or whatever it might be. You are more than welcome to make a return.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that, and thanks to everyone who's reached out over the years and said nice things. I appreciate that as well, and wish you, Josh, all the best, and all the listeners as well.
Yeah, so we will move on, sadly, to a new dawn, I suppose. We'll try to keep the standard up, but it will be difficult. But Dave, for one last time, mate, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, mate. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks. We will see you next week.